Hello friend, and welcome to Strange New Borgcast episode 2.2 with Ambry and Peter.
Hello. We've got some previously on the Broken Circle. Ol pointed out that we've seen the single nasaled ship model before that was docked at Starbase 1.
All right,
way back in episode 1 of the first season.
Oh.
It was the USS Archer, which Una and a couple of other crew took to a first contact mission that went wrong.
Oh, that one?
Yeah.
Oh. See, I think we probably almost deliberately wiped that from our brains.
Possibly. I don't know.
I don't mean the episode, I mean the ship. It's a really ugly, horrible ship of
It
wrong.
is. And it doesn't make any sense that only 3 people could have crewed it. But anyway, Andy thinks the Strange New World showrunners aren't keen on reusing designs from Disco, which is why the crossfield looked different.
Oh, okay.
Although why they then identify the ship as being a crossfield
that doesn't make
is still
sense.
a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a crossfield refit design, which makes more sense than what they did with the Titan in Picard anyways.
Oh, is it the Crossfield A?
Well, that's funny enough. That was, I think Ol suggested that, which will make Andy happy. But anyway, tonight we're covering Ad Astra per Aspera.
Oh, Latin Pizza Express, yeah.
Yeah, but at least the Latin title's relevant.
Yes.
I give him a pass for this one.
Yeah.
Until 2 months ago, my record with Starfleet was spotless. When they didn't know, they didn't care. The only thing that's changed is that they know the truth.
And that you lied about it. Must be nice.
What's that?
It's just some Illyrians have modifications they can't hide, and some of us refuse to.
So you start with a recap of Una's history, which makes sense because people could have jumped on for season 2. You never know. So I think it's not too long a recap, I don't think, and I think it makes sense to have it. Sometimes they piss me off, but this doesn't. And then you have a pretty city. I liked the city.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Nice CG mat.
Yeah, but it felt real.
Yeah.
Now, it may have been based on somewhere, I wouldn't know, but sometimes in science fiction...
I think it's a lot easier to make these things look realer if the lighting is down low, as it was. It was a nighttime thing. If it had been bright sunshine, it might have seemed a little less real, but there we go.
That's true. As a city lover myself, I appreciate it when science fiction gets cities right. It's not the only reason by any means, it's one of the reasons I like Blade Runner.
Uh-huh.
And I appreciated it here. And then you have an injured child, which we later find out is Una as a child.
Well, I think you kind of guessed straight away.
And she's got a bad leg and she's clearly trying to heal herself and it's not working. And then you have Una with a Starfleet bod who looks... I'm trying to think of the right way to describe my initial response to him without offending a whole load of people. In our firm, let's make this specific, he looks like the sort of person who works in IT. He doesn't look like he has any talent for the law.
Oh, right, okay.
And he looks... I don't know whether nervous or uncomfortable is the right word, but out of his depth, perhaps. Yeah. And that might be deliberate. That might be deliberate direction.
Oh, yeah. They're making him look out of his depth because that, it's one of the reasons why she wants a different counsel.
Yeah. And basically, she's offered a plea deal of dishonourable discharge but no prison. She doesn't want it. And then the council's going, oh, no, you need to take it. She's like, how can I trust him if he works for you? Which made me think of Measure of a Man.
Mm-hmm.
Where actually both Picard and Riker, they're doing their best, but it's still awkward, isn't it? And wrong, and it's broken, don't you think?
It is a broken system, but it's fairer than what Una's being offered here. I mean, at least Data was being prosecuted by somebody who knew him. I mean, it was really awkward for Riker, but this is one of the reasons why that episode works so much better than this one. But yeah.
So yeah, anyway, she's just like, no, we're not taking the plea deal. And then she doesn't want the council anymore. In the meantime, you've got Pike, who's gone to a planet that's not suitable for human life, although some people have been able... Why does it say human life? Because Illyrians aren't human. Why does it say humanoid life? I don't know. Anyway, or just oxygen breathers. But anyway, the Illyrians have adapted, but obviously he hasn't, so he's got a breather. And he's trying to get hold of the lawyer, like he said at the end of the last episode. And the PA is acting as gatekeeper and clearly doesn't want to let him through. And then he's got oxygen being supplied to the breather. And it's down to 2%. And he's like, no, I'm waiting, I can wait. And then basically he nearly dies. So the PA rushes to the actual lawyer. And they flood the room with oxygen and he's okay and he can take his mask off. And she's like, I knew you were stubborn, I didn't realise you were stupid. And then you have Pike trying to convince this lawyer, whose name I never once catch. And this is the second
She's Councillor Nera Catul.
Nera. Okay. It's just that I've watched this episode 3-4 times.
I think she's only named once.
Yeah.
It's always a problem.
Yeah, and I just don't catch her name. I just
Yeah.
think of her as the lawyer, but...
It's like last time when we had the name of the conspiracy group, Broken Circle, which was the name of the episode, only mentioned once.
Yeah.
It's particularly stupid.
Anyway, so Nera, there's sort of the two of them bouncing off, and I won't repeat the dialogue because I won't do it justice, but basically it involves Pike admitting that he was wrong about Illyrians and referencing the episode where they were trapped on the planet, him and Spock. Now, do you know what that episode was?
Having looked it up whilst editing, it's Ghosts of Illyria.
And he says that he thinks that the Federation is wrong about Illyrians, and he was wrong. And then she knows about the case. She's got feelings. She's got other cases and against the Federation, and she doesn't want to take this case. And he's like, "Yeah, and you've had some of them thrown out. Wouldn't it help your other cases if you took this one? Because it could be groundbreaking. It give those other cases more publicity." So anyway, he wins the argument. Unsurprisingly, I think you knew he was going to, but anyway. And then you see her going to meet Una, and she was saying she's apologises for not standing up before. It's clearly to do with the past between her and Nera, but she says she wasn't standing up before, but she is now. Meanwhile, Pike's girlfriend is cross. That's Captain Battelle, isn't it? Yeah, like Mattel the toy, but with a B. Mm-hmm. Right, because Una's rejected the plea deal. And it's like, we've got to uphold the law. And Pike's like, what if the law is wrong? But she does say she didn't want the case. She didn't seek the case out. So although they sort of disagreed over it, if you see what I mean, it's not...
It does rather beg the question what Captain Patel's role is, because I'm sure she was a captain of a ship in the last season, and they sort of met up at one point.
Yes, and she's captain of a ship later.
So why is she now acting as in the JAG's office? It doesn't make any sense.
My guess is a secondment.
Uh-huh.
And because they are common in the forces that you get seconded for a set period of time for whatever reason. So there must be, because she was involved in Una's arrest at the end of the last season.
Yeah, well,
my guess is
that was simple, because that you could have said they were just the nearest starship, so they were called upon to arrest Una rather than call the Enterprise back to do it, which would have been the other way of doing it. But
true, but
that made some sense. But to then she's now seconded, so I think it's just convenient so that we have somebody that we know from previously, and there's a bit of
I think you're
what's
right.
the phrase? There's
tension between her and Pike.
Yes.
And I think you're right, but I also think that if you think about the universe for a moment, the JAG's office doesn't expect to normally have that many cases because we are talking about a utopia. Mm-hmm. So it would make sense that they don't have a high level of standing staff, and instead they're required to second when they have a big case on. So it makes sense, therefore, that she has been seconded. It's just that the reason it's her specifically is the story. In
the Next Generation one, Measure of a Man, it's because they don't have any staff, because it's just been set up as a new star base or something.
Yeah.
So that gives a good reason why Riker then gets seconded for it. Yeah, it just seems a bit weird, this one. But anyway, I think it's literally just so there's a bit of tension there that wouldn't otherwise be there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, the idea that the JAG office would have to second. I think it's story purposes that she's the one who gets seconded.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think that the idea that they have to second and don't have many standing staff is logical in the universe we've got here. But then you cut to them back in the JAG office, and because she's rejected the plea deal, the bad Vulcan, whose name I never catch.
Pasulk, again, he's mentioned once, I think, his name.
What?
Pasulk.
Pasulk?
Yeah, I know.
Is he having a Pasulk?
I don't know. And why does his name not start with S? It's
or T.
Yeah.
S and T.
Well, T is the women, the men are always S.
Oh no, Tuvok.
Yes, that's true. Later on, they get T's. It's like they were working their way through the alphabet. But why P? I don't know. Is this earlier on and they...
Yeah. But anyway, S or T I'm used to with Vulcans.
Yeah.
So, okay, Pasulk, that's what I'm calling him now. Okay, so anyway, Pasulk is going, right, I've had it. And they're seeking sedition charges and 20 years in prison. And that's then your teaser. And so then Neera is on the Enterprise, and Pike has said she can set up in Una's office, which, which Una's quarters.
Office quarters, yes, which seems a bit rude. I wouldn't want somebody set up in my quarters.
No, but she's only there while Una isn't, and Una isn't because Una's in prison. It's logical.
I think the inference is that Pike's done it for reasons of trying to motivate Neera.
Yeah, you can see all the photos of her and that around the room. Yeah, I think so. But it's also logical use of space, to be fair. And then La'an appears and says she thinks she might be able to get the case thrown out, because if the evidence that provided to the court is obtained illegally, it cannot be used.
Yeah, and she goes off to investigate, and you think, oh, that's going somewhere, and it doesn't.
Well, yes, it does, but not where you think it's going to go.
No, it doesn't. I mean, ultimately, she doesn't find out anything. She says that herself.
Yes, because the reason she doesn't find out anything is because Una turns herself in.
I know, but the whole point is, had there been an investigation, had La'an have something to find out, had there been, her providing evidence for the defence, that at least would have been something. We don't even get that.
No, because she's looking, and you've got the confrontation a bit later on with Uhura, and the reason that she's looking is because she thinks it's her and someone's stolen her personal log, as you find out later, and it's all to do with her own motivations and her own...
Yeah, my point is, it has no bearing. It goes nowhere. It does nothing.
No, it doesn't go nowhere and do nothing.
It literally does.
No, it doesn't, because it leads to both La'an's emotional arc and character development as someone who is worried that because she's genetically modified, she might be affected, and is seeing herself as a monster because that's the way the prevailing political climate. And it also goes to the fact that Una turned herself in, but she didn't do it in an obvious way.
Had she found out that Una had turned herself in, at least that would have been something. Something would have been achieved. But we don't. She just admits it in court as part of that long, boring scene.
It's not boring.
Oh, it's so boring. But anyway, let's carry on, because otherwise we'll never get to the end of this long, boring story.
Yeah, it's not long and boring. Batel appears and talks to Pike about Una, and says, she's like, look, I know you want to be on the stand and you want to support her. And he's like, yes, I can cope. So she immediately sort of starts talking to him, seeming friendly, then turns it on about, when did you know this? And then gives it an example of how he is going to walk into the prosecution's arms, effectively, in terms of the defence that he would give, and demonstrates that it's not just, it's a risk to him, it's a risk to everybody. He is not going to help. Then you have the scene that I find amusing between Pasulk and Spock, with Mbenga and Ortegas sort of nearby but not too close in the mess, I presume it is.
Yeah.
And Mbenga, and I love the commentary that Ortegas gives, which is pretty much accurate, to be fair. And, I must throw my friend, you must throw my friend in jail just for being who she is, which is exactly the point of this episode. And Mbenga says, look, you might not be able to see it, but, these two hate each other. And she's like, yeah, right. And then Spock appears and says, I'm so sorry you had to witness that. And they just crease. And then you have the scene that I mentioned before where La'an is like, you need to look at all these communications from this period of time, including personal logs. That's illegal. You can't access personal logs without permission or a specific subpoena. And Nyota refuses. And I like that she stands up to... La'an. It shows, I think, growth in her character compared to previous season. And she explains why she's standing up. She's like, no. And she's like, if the evidence is there, you need to find it another way, which I like. And then in the trial, you have the prosecution outlining the dangers of genetic modification, which we as big Star Trek fans don't need. But again, somebody might need that background information if this is not where this is their first Trek, or New Trek is their first Trek. But then Neera counteracts that with a list of bad laws. Just because something is the law doesn't make it right or wrong. So, slavery was legal, discrimination. And the first time around I didn't get this. Why? Because she does this more than once. She mentions not just on the basis of somebody's identity or who they love or the colour of their skin, but also their culture and how they worship. And I'm thinking... that doesn't... It's like you think of Starfleet. It's like, why would they give a shit about anybody who worships? They're all, thanks to Gene Roddenberry, they're all like, atheism is God or whatever. And if they worship anything, it's atheism or science. And I'm thinking, this doesn't fit right. But then, of course, later on, you have the whole thing about how the Illyrians cannot continue their cultural practices and they have to conduct their rituals in secret. And it was only really on this watch that I kind of...
And I think it's fair to say that Trek has been somewhat more pro-religion from Deep Space Nine onwards.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine. But at the time, Deep Space Nine really stood out.
It did,
didn't
yes.
it?
Yeah. It's one of the refreshing things about it.
Yeah, well, it's amazing as a series. But yes, it was very different from the other Trek of its time.
Mm-hmm.
And what she says is that the Federation set up this utopia, which it understandably wanted to protect, but it's been blinded by centuries of fear as a result of the eugenics wars, and so they have now become the persecutors, which of course makes me think of the Covenant conflict in Gaza. And then that's when she says again about how people being persecuted for how they worshipped and who they loved, and made uncomfortable for being who they are. And then she says, how can those responsible for those laws actually serve justice? Which is a good point. But then it makes me think, well, how can anybody serve justice anywhere? Because there's bad laws everywhere. Do you know what I mean? There's no such thing as a perfect legal system. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I get the point she's making, but I don't
think you work for lawyers?
And then you have Admiral April on the stand and talks about, he promoted Una, she was really good, but he would not have put Una forward for promotion had he known that she was genetically modified, which, seems logical. I think probably most of them wouldn't. But obviously that gets built on, and then Nero references the Prime Directive and mentions the number of times he's broken it, which I like. Clearly it's a whole, Starfleet captain thing.
Yeah, apparently they all do.
Yeah. And it's like the rules Starfleet applies only if the captain says so. And they're all shouting at her like, you can't say that. And I'm thinking, yes, you can. It's true and it's relevant. And she says, clearly you can break the law if you so choose. So we're not dealing with law here. We're dealing with fear and racial prejudice. So he storms off in a huff.
Well, I suppose if I were to defend him, he feels like his integrity's been questioned. That's going to make you pissed off, isn't it, to be fair?
Yes.
I mean, and possibly he's also angry because he knows that she's touched a nerve as well.
Yeah, I wondered that. I wondered that. To be honest, though, I mean, I work for lawyers, but I would never manage 5 minutes in a courtroom. I'd either be really angry and, as a result, rude and get thrown out of the court for
you'd be
swearing.
in contempt of court within minutes, I should think.
For swearing. Or the opposite would happen, as does sometimes happen to me when I'm confronted. Not often, but it does sometimes. I just totally break down and burst into tears. Neither of them would be any help to anybody, would they?
Not massively.
No. So then Una was turning round to Nira, like, when she's in her cell and they're having counsel as defendant and counsel, and she's just like, what were you doing out there? Because obviously she likes April, and she's just, but she's trying to, but Nira is trying to say, look, not everybody has not all Illyrians have your privilege, and she wants this case to be a stepping stone. And it's like, it's not your job to make the Federation look bad. And it's like, well, and I was thinking automatically, well, it is her job to make them look bad if that's what's going to win you the case.
Mm-hmm. You haven't mentioned anything about the uniforms, which I'm very, very disappointed about, obviously, because that's the most important.
Okay, fine.
Just a man in a uniform. Tonight, that's what I want you to be.
I noticed the really stupid badges.
Yes, which are a sort of interpretation of the, let's face it, slightly cheap-looking ones we got in the original series.
Yeah, but these...
They're sort of glossier versions, but they're just as colourful, so they do match.
Just... Oh.
I like them.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, God. They made me think of a particular sweet that you used to get in dolly mixtures.
Oh, right, yeah. Back in the days of round trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a shiny, hard sweet. Yes, and it's square, and you can arrange it in different patterns. Yeah. I wanted to eat them badges.
Yeah, they did look very tasty. Yes.
Yeah.
I particularly like the collars, though. I think they're very smart and, what you'd expect from a dress uniform. So they're a nice interpretation of the original series ones. They look better without looking completely different. So I thought that was a good effort, that.
I don't know what I would have done with a weird-ass insignia. I can only tell you it wasn't that.
Also, the courtroom, which we obviously see an awful lot of, is a good set. It's got a very interesting fresco, which apparently it depicts member races of the Federation, although it's always out of focus, so you can't see it. So
it's probably deliberate.
Well, I don't know. If they make all the effort to give you something to look at, and then if it's always out of focus, I mean, this is kind of my criticism of a lot of the starships as well. They make these models, they make them really tiny, so you can't see them properly, and you don't get any beauty shots. But it did remind me a bit of Palpatine's office in Revenge of the Sith. Because he's got that big mural there about the Sith and the Jedi fighting. Yes. Oh, and the most important thing.
Right, something to do with the spaceship.
No, there's nothing to do with spaceships. There are barely any spaceships in this.
Fine.
The chair that Una has to sit on has the glowy thing of truth.
Yes.
The glowy handrest of truth, which again, nice touch, nice nod to the original series.
When was that? And was that in Menagerie?
Not just Menagerie, but also Court Martial as well.
Okay, fair enough. I don't pay much attention to offices, including my own. I mean, I literally for weeks did not spot an 8-foot reindeer.
When literally all you got is people talking at one another, you take
listen
everything
to
you
the
get.
dialogue and you watch their faces.
You take everything you can get, believe me. Meeting with Pike, April refuses a drink from him and marches out. So that's like a sort of tension because a long-standing friendship has been damaged, which is something at least.
It's not Pike's bloody fault. I think
It's not Pike's fault, but they're doing their best to inject some tension into the situation.
I don't like that scene because it's not Pike's fault. I think it would be different if April was meeting with Una. Like after, like when they all give her the round of applause and everything at the end, if things were still tense between them at the end, that would make sense. But it's not Pike's bloody fault, and I just think it makes him look worse, and it would be better off if he accepted the drink, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Well, the captain ends up pouring Admiral's drink into his and necks it, so, waste not, one not. Una has a go at Nera for attacking April and the Federation. The Council points out that this might bring them closer to justice for Illyrians.
Yep.
Una rightly accuses her of just using her as a soapbox, leaving her behind, which apparently touches on something that happened in the past, and we find out about that later on. La'an, Spock and Mbenga are called as character witnesses. Interestingly, the Doctor gets a light blue dress uniform, which McCoy doesn't. He gets the same sciences blue that Spock does, so I don't quite know where that's come from, but anyway.
Oh, no, you're right. I hadn't really picked that out, but... Okay, now I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
On the ship, normal uniforms...
Mm-hmm.
Spock and Mbenga's the same apart from the division badge? Ooh. Or is there a difference there already?
He has a very different looking uniform, which is similar to McCoy's one that does up a different way, if you see what I mean. I'm now stretching my memory to try and remember whether it's a different colour blue or not. It could be.
Because my thinking is...
Why is Mbenga's... That's weird, isn't it? Anyway.
Yeah, so my thinking is, if Mbenga and Spock have different uniforms on the ship, it's logical for them to have different dress uniforms.
Yeah.
It's just, it then begs the question, why have they got different uniforms on the ship?
Exactly.
So you're kind of asking the right question in the wrong place, if you see what I mean.
Anyway, there's a moment when La'an denies suspecting Una was Illyrian, which we know is a lie. And Pasulk reacts to this and seems to make a note, but I mean, this goes nowhere.
So does the glowy thing show it's a lie, or does her genetic modification that comes up later mean that she can defeat the glowy thing?
I don't know. It's a good question, yeah. Spock says he did send something, but that turns out to be an affinity for Gilbert and Sullivan musicals.
Which, of course, was in that short trek.
Exactly. Damning evidence indeed.
I like that, and I love the way that she grins.
And he rightly points out the illogic of Starfleet's position on the blanket GM ban.
Yep. And punishing itself.
Exactly, yes. Which you'd have thought, well, would have been a better argument at the end. But anyway, La'an brings the promised legal documents to Nera, who asks if she found out anything about the data leak on Una's nature. The Council suggests La'an thinks it was her. Apparently, the Lieutenant recorded a personal log when she found out that Una was Illyrian. She also thinks she carries augmentations as part of her Noonien Singh heritage.
It's logical.
Yeah, but if so, why wasn't she banned from Starfleet? Clearly she doesn't, otherwise they would have banned her. The Council points out that she has free will to choose not to be a monster just like anyone else.
Yeah. But also I like, again, feeding into... There are more than one allegory going on here, but the trans allegory and other allegories going on that just, genetics is not destiny. That's where that came in. And that, you can choose who you are going to be or not going to be. And this also, I don't know whether it's deliberate or not, but I know that a lot of people who have an abusive parent are genuinely terrified if they have kids they're going to abuse them, even though they're actually very different people. Yeah. It's a genuine worry.
Yeah, well, an understandable one, but yeah, you're right. It doesn't mean you are. No. There's also the question of who went into her personal logs, which apparently takes much more time to clear than has been possible. The question then becomes who did leak Una's heritage, and this is one of the more interesting scenes, but again, you expect it to translate into some action, and it doesn't. Back to the trial, Una is called to the stand by her own counsel, and she's asked why she joined Starfleet, knowing that she might be found out. And this is where the episode title comes in. Ad Astra per Aspera, she replies to the stars through hardship, the original Starfleet motto before it joined the Federation. For her, it's about finding salvation through service. We hear how she got the leg break and infection from the beginning of the episode. And the antipathy between her and Nira is explained as Una's family could pass as non-Illyrian, and they left those who couldn't behind, presumably including Nira.
But then why... That sounds like it's Nira blaming her parents. Like her for her parents' decision. If she was a child, it wasn't her decision to make.
Possibly, but people do that sort of thing, don't they? So it's not completely illogical. Well, I suppose it is illogical, but it's very at a very emotional response that you left us behind.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
But and I don't have an issue with the fact that the child Nira had a big issue with the child.
But you thought that she'd have got to grips with that by now, yeah?
But knowing that it was a decision not made by her but by her parents.
Yeah. Nira asked how Starfleet found out about her nature, and Una admits it was because she was sick of living a lie. And therefore she basically grasped herself.
Or outed herself, yeah.
But she still believed in Starfleet. Admiral Pasulk declares that this is irrelevant and takes over the prosecution, demanding to know when Pike knew she was Illyrian. He declares it's a conspiracy, and there's tense music. But the fact, unfortunately, that Pike isn't in the room, but he's just watching it on telly, rather robs it of any tension. That's,
for me, where I agree with you about this episode. I like the courtroom scenes. I mean, I was a fan of Perry Mason as a kid. That I find them emotionally charged and characterful. Right? What I don't find emotionally charged and characterful is all the shots of the crew of the Enterprise watching them on telly.
It divorces them from the proceedings, and you need Pike there with everybody looking at him accusingly for this to really have any weight.
He needs to be like in the gallery or whatever they call it, don't they?
Present,
but not participating.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's what.
As it is, you just Mount Beth bless him just looks a bit sort of ooh.
Yeah,
and it's like that's.
It doesn't.
If he'd been in the room, he would have looked really uncomfortable.
The other thing that might have worked if getting them all in the room, let's say logistically, it wasn't possible, and that's what the director had to work with. No, in terms of
in terms of the actors' availability, because we've already heard that apparently. Right. He was spending time with his family. Instead of being in Star Trek.
Yeah. Anyway, we know where your priorities lie. Anyway, my point is, let's say that logistically it couldn't happen, right? In terms of direction, that he couldn't be in the gallery. Then you make something of the fact that they're feeling powerless by being divorced by proceedings, but you only have to do that once. You only once have to show them all watching them on telly to give that sense of they're powerless to help their friend. You don't keep cutting back. Yep. I don't know what you do instead, but it isn't that. It doesn't help.
No, it's the motion picture syndrome, isn't it? People watching stuff happening on screen is never tense. I'm sorry.
No. And as I said, doing it once to try and convey the fact that they are feeling helpless, fine. One shot of that is okay. But repeatedly doing it, that is boring. I don't find the courtroom scenes boring. I find that boring. And it happens quite a few times, doesn't it, in the episode?
Nira starts asking Patel about Starfleet's regulations about giving asylum to those being persecuted, getting her off on a technicality.
Well, except I would argue it isn't. To me, that doesn't feel like a technicality. To me, it feels like saying that she's trying to make her point to Starfleet of, you know better, you could be better, you should see the Illyrians as, and other, not all, but other genetically modified people as persecuted. Actually, by you, by the way. And that is the correct response to genetically modified people, not what you have been doing up till now. So I think she's actually deliberately trying to make a wider political...
The bottom line is they can only get her off on a technicality, because otherwise that fucks up what happens in Deep Space Nine. Because if they've come to their senses, then that episode of Deep Space Nine doesn't work, does it? So we've got prequel issues, really in their heads. Here.
Yes, but... I think that how can I put this? I don't think that Nira, as the lawyer, sees it as getting Una off on a technicality. I think that Nira, as the lawyer, sees it that she is trying to make a wider point to Starfleet. I think you can say that because of the likes of Pasulk, that fell on deaf ears.
Eventually, yes. Well, except she does get off.
No, as in the wider point, not the Una specific point, but the wider point that the lawyer is trying to make. I think that the I think it's the Jag, or is it the judge? Anyway, the middle woman.
Yeah.
I think she gets the point, and I think so does the.
Yeah, no, she actually makes the point that here we have, because of Una's particular circumstances, that the law needs to be compassionate and not, sticking. She says something about lines need to be redrawn sometimes. Which is fine.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole argument about why is her being in Starfleet, her having asylum. I mean, she can be in the Federation and have asylum, but why? The whole thing is she's not allowed to serve in Starfleet because of her GM nature. I don't quite understand the leap that because she's asked for asylum, therefore she can serve in Starfleet as well, if you see what I mean.
I think that's where the technicality comes in. Because if you have asked for asylum, you're severing your connections from a regime.
Right, well, that's a point that's not well made then, I think it's fair to say.
And I would agree.
Yeah.
In terms of the wider point the lawyer is trying to make, which is that the Federation is persecuting Illyrians, which it is, I think that the woman gets it. I think possibly is it a Tellarite?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he gets it. Pasulk definitely doesn't. You wouldn't know whether the Vulcan does or doesn't because Vulcan.
Yeah, he's really got very little input in this story at all. So,
but I think continuity can work on the basis that, let's say, Starfleet's divided on this issue when they go away and talk about it.
But the bottom line is they can't really make a great breakthrough here on the issue because we know full well that by the time of Deep Space Nine, they've still not got it sorted.
No,
so it does really hamstring them. This, but never mind.
It does, and I think it also works in terms of this is an asylum claim, but you are actually the ones doing the persecuting. Mm-hmm. Which is the point that she's making, and that's when they shout at her and say she's not allowed to say it. And again, you can argue in terms of continuity. Well, she wasn't allowed to say that, and you struck that all from the record, so therefore it doesn't get carried into the wider discussion by the powers that be.
I mean, you can't argue that this isn't a very long scene. Literally, this is this scene where Neera is cross-examining her own clients goes on a very long time. Now, you found it emotionally engaging.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree with what they're trying to say about the politics here. Far from it. I'm completely behind it. I just found it very, very dull because it's just people talking in a room. Yeah,
because if it's not The Rock or spaceships or some of I think you've got about 5 criteria for anything you watch, and if it doesn't hit one of them, then you aren't interested.
Mm-hmm. That said, I mean, there are certain courtroom dramas that, do work for me. I mean, 12 Angry Men, I defy anybody to watch that and not be completely gripped by it, even though it's not even in the courtroom. It's literally just 12 guys in the same set for the whole film, just sweating.
I think your problem is the fact that I think it's the equivalent of you've gone to watch The Rock, okay? Your expectations are going to be of a particular thing, and The Rock is just sat in a room talking. You're going to be really angry.
Yeah.
Right?
It'd be an interesting career move for him, certainly.
It would.
The Rock stars in 12 Angry Men.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
No, actually, I really can't. My point is, I think
he'd literally just beat the crap out of everybody until they made the right decision. That would be how that one panned out.
But I think your problem is that you don't necessarily have an issue with courtroom drama. What you have an issue with is a show that you think is something else being a courtroom drama.
Yeah, and
that's why you didn't like the Galactica courtroom scenes.
Oh, that was really dull. Yeah.
That's why you don't like this. That's why you wouldn't like it if The Rock was in a courtroom
I'll
drama.
tell you what, though, I liked
Arnie.
another courtroom drama I liked, Measure of a Man. If you listen back to our podcast on that. And the reason why Measure of a Man works, Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
I mean, the quality of the acting is, makes a huge difference. And nobody's a bad actor in this, don't get me wrong, but nobody has the magnetic personality of it was Peter Fonda, was it, in 12 Angry Men?
Yeah.
Or Patrick Stewart. That's your issue you've got here.
It's about some actors being able to elevate material in a big way, including beyond genre, because you never liked Shakespeare until you saw Sir Pat Stew in Shakespeare, and then you did.
That was only because I was pretending it was Picard.
You still
And I was in the room with Patrick Stewart, so I enjoyed it.
But the point is, it worked. He came on as Malvolio, jumping up those steps with his feet tied together, and you pissed yourself laughing, which was the point of the scene.
Yeah.
So, I think the reason Measure of a Man works because Patrick Stewart is the calibre of actor of which there are not many.
Yes, this is true.
Who can elevate that material. And had it been a different character...
That scene in Measure of a Man where he goes,
Are you prepared to condemn him and all who come after him to servitude and slavery? Your Honor, Starfleet was founded to seek out new life. Well, there it sits. Waiting.
There's nothing like that in this, I'm afraid.
No, there isn't. And it doesn't mean that the actors are bad.
No, they're not bad actors, but they're not of the...
They're not...
You've got to have a really, really good actor to make these things work for me, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid my brain has gone to an M&S place, but it's the only way I can think to explain it.
M&S?
You know their adverts. This isn't just
any courtroom scene. This is a Marks and Spencer's. Okay.
But do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that the only good
Now, going back to what you're saying about expectations, I think one of the other issues is that the first episode, and I'm so glad that this wasn't the first episode, but the first episode was so much hijinks and action and stuff, sometimes a little, OTT, but anyway, you go from that to this, where nothing is happening except people chatting, and it feels like a huge gear change. And I know some people like that, but I found it off-putting.
This doesn't bother me at all, but then we've had other courtroom dramas in Star Trek, and it's not.
Well, let's just finish this one off. So Una returns to the Enterprise's first officer. Nira calls the technicality a start.
Which I appreciate, and I think it doesn't go anywhere. But
they all give her a round of applause, except for Spock, which was nice. I like that.
Liked
you
the
can't
fact
imagine
that
him clapping.
No, I like the fact he just did not clap.
Pick, yeah, Captain Pick, as he's known. Pike gives Una a hug, which, did you not find that a tad unprofessional?
No, I loved it.
At the very least, you should ask before giving somebody a hug.
He looked at her, and he looked in her eyes for a response. And then he gave her a hug, which she responded to, and then he put her back, and then that was it.
Sorry, it's been drummed into me. You never hug anybody unless you've asked permission. And particularly if you outrank them, that's very...
Yeah, I get that. But they have a long-standing friendship. He's not making overtures in that way to her. It's nothing sexual about it at all. It's not like that. And he looks at her for a long time and then goes in for the hug.
Uh-huh. I also expected the Admiral Pasulk stuff to be going somewhere. He seemed to be
I
dodgy,
agree.
but that went nowhere. That moment when he makes a note, you think, oh, hang on, what's going on? Nowhere. And I expected Lan's investigation there to be made more of that, but literally it's just like, oh no, I found nothing. And then Una confesses, and that just felt very unsatisfactory. It needed a B-plot, desperately needed a B-plot, just to keep us going. Measure of Man works without a B-plot because it's got Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
This doesn't, unfortunately.
I'm not sure what the B-plot would have been. I think possibly...
some sort of investigation, and even if it wasn't like the key bit of evidence, at least if La'an had found some evidence and you'd seen her do it, then you'd have felt like that, there was some stuff going on. It's an investigation.
Or another thing that could have been going on as the B plot is instead of all the crew standing there like idiots watching the telly, have them do something. Not necessarily a big threat to the ship or anything like that, but just have them doing something and involved in something.
Yeah.
That's the rest of the crew doing something other than watching something on the screen. I'm not sure that it necessarily would have worked having the crew in a B plot that directly connects to the A plot. It might have done, I'm not sure. But I think the crew should have been doing something, and it should not have been...
watching it all on the telly.
No. Apart from one time, and then maybe Pike comes in and says, "Look, I know you want to help."
That would have been a nice one. Yeah,
I know you. I know.
But these things have got to run their course. We
can't be involved,
exactly.
and so therefore do whatever it is you're doing. Yeah.
that would have been good.
You know what else I think would have helped the episode is I don't know what she would have done, but an appearance by Simca. What's her actual character name?
Oh, the engineer, Pellier. Yes.
Just something in there for her, or maybe her coming in and telling them off and being sarcastic or something, and we've got this to be getting on.
Well,
with.
she could have given see how bad things were in the 20th, 21st century.
Yeah.
And you've come so far, and yet you're still falling into the same. She'd had a really interesting perspective, but I guess this was probably written before she joined. So
Probably, but they could have done a B plot with her.
Yeah,
and filmed
exactly.
that after, and had so having her present a different perspective, and then the idea is you get chivied away from the telly. No, you can't do anything, so you're doing this, whatever this is, instead. I'm not saying the episode is perfect, but I genuinely was very moved by the court scenes, and also by the scene with La'an, where it's very, very clear that she thought of herself as a monster, and hopefully no longer will.
there we go. Right, well, let's find out what other people thought. We have heard from Jeff. This is a fantastic episode and pure Star Trek. Fictional analogues to real-world issues are explored passionately as Yutindi Badaki, there you go, turns in an incredible guest star performance.
Yes, she does.
She's okay. I didn't think she was that.
I thought she was really good, properly Perry Mason.
Oh, right, okay. Best of all, though, Starfleet and the Federation has shown us flawed. The resolution of the issue depends on calling on these bodies to live up to their higher ideals.
Yep,
Which is true.
yep. And we've heard from Sampo and Yona.
Hello.
Hello.
So we just watched
Per Aspera, Ad Astra. Or was it Ad Astra, Per Aspera?
something like that, Latin in any case. At least they explained it in the episode, so it wasn't just a random Latin.
No, it's a very familiar Finnish painting.
Really?
It is.
Okay,
From Akseli Golenkollela.
great. So what happened in it?
In the painting.
No, in the episode.
A law and justice.
I think this might sound odd since the last episode had fights and spaceships and all that, but I think I actually enjoyed this episode more than the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to agree, but I mean, the last episode sort of missed focus and it was all over the place. This was clearly about something. Of course, the downside is it didn't actually use almost any of its great cast and focused mostly on the lawyer and Una. But I mean, it tackled important things, very thinly veiled problems that we're still facing today in our world. And I think that's Star Trek at its best when it's tackling the big issues. And okay.
Yeah, I didn't understand what was so horrifying about genetic modification.
Yeah, I paused it and gave you a brief history of the eugenics wars back in, 1992, if I remember correctly. And then I unpaused it, and then the woman basically explained the same thing. So
You get woman-splained.
But yeah, I mean, I understand if some people think this was boring, but I think it was well written, a bit heavy-handed, but I really liked it.
It was nice job with the script.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I don't want the entire series to be like this, but one episode, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, and I guess it was filled with chord flow and chord tropes.
Cliches.
Cliches, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly in the way Una's friend was talking to the chord.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a cliche that you make a big speech and then you're basically, well, I mean, okay.
You're walking with the book and the book looked like so light. I mean, it's a huge book with like probably 2,000 pages, and she was like carrying it with one hand.
She was also genetically modified, so.
Yeah. and for a moment in there, I thought she was the one who turned Una in, but then it was Una herself.
It would have been a bit different. And at least it wasn't that she just made a big speech and they just let her off. She did find a technicality that allowed the judges to let her off because it was clearly the right thing to do.
I wonder how she orders coffee at the lunch break.
She makes a 10-minute speech about
coffee and milk and sugar.
Yeah, most likely. Well, there was a bit of levity in there. I mean, I found the one where the doctor and the pilot were psychoanalyzing the two Vulcans there, and Spock came. I'm sorry you had to witness that. That made me chuckle slightly. And another thing that was only amusing to me, the Vulcan prosecutor Patel, I think, I mean, just add peacock hair and he looked exactly like Londo Mollari with the huge eyebrows and the black suit. But okay, personality-wise, not so much, but yeah. But that's the problem with good episodes you find that are just about one thing. You find very little to say about them, so I actually don't have anything more to add.
No need to complain of misogyny or so.
Yeah, exactly. We're in new Trek territory.
That's only a good thing that we can see that there is progress. Per Aspera Ad Astra.
Exactly. That's meta. I guess that's why you almost fell asleep during one of the speeches.
But I'm awake now.
Yes, and I said nearly. Yeah.
Yeah, I also have had a rough week.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Hopefully there's some action next time. I mean, like I said, I don't want every episode to be like this, but I really dig this.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it sounds like I'm defending myself, so let's just stop here and hear from you again next week.
Next week.
And, well, 2 weeks. Okay. Well,
2 weeks.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So they disagreed like we did, but more politely with each other.
Yes, I'm sorry you had a bad week, Yona.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I hope it gets better. I'm very much with Sampo on this. I did really enjoy it. I enjoyed it more than last week. I found it really moving. But also, I would not want to have every episode like this. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I enjoy it is because it's a different way of exploring the themes that Star Trek is about. If it was like this every week, I wouldn't want to watch. That's not the point. But I like it as a different way of doing a Star Trek episode.
And I think it's fair to say that this is more coherent in tone than the first episode, because
it
was a bit all over the place.
Yes.
But then I think the first episode kind of reflects how the rest of the season's going to go. So.
Yeah, which is a pick-a-mix blind bag.
Yes. But yes, walking with a book. That is a very courtroom cliche, and she does it. And the question then becomes, why is it a fecking book?
I wrote that down.
Why isn't she got a pad?
Yes, I wrote that down. I mean, there are two reasons I can think why it might be the case. One is that it's a deliberate... Most of what goes on in the court is about the law, but there's also an element of acting in that. Hence, lawyers are often bad, but try to be actors. And so she is acting, in inverted commas, a role by carrying this big book around. That's the word I'm looking for, staging. So it's not acting, it's staging. Mm-hmm. It's deliberate staging on her part. So she could have, when she says to La'an, I want to access the, whatever code it is, she could have done that electronically, easily. Yep. The reason it's taken time is La'an's had to go away and replicate the fucking thing.
Yeah.
That's what's taken the time. And she's walking around with it, parading it as a deliberate act of staging as a lawyer. This book has heft. Look at the weight of this book. Do you see what I mean? So that's why she's done it. And yes, she has to be alluring to do it with one hand, because you get Bibles that are that big. And the last time I had to hold one that big, it took 2 hands.
Mm-hmm. And no, she can't say anything quickly because lawyers get charged by the hour. So they won't use 2 words when 6 will do.
Also, they are very into detail, and if they can only be that detailed by taking 17 words instead of 2, they will use 17 words.
Indeed.
Because to use 2 is less accurate. I hadn't clocked. You are right. The prosecutor was reminding me of someone, and it wasn't me recognising the actor. There's a Londo-ish look to him.
I suppose, possibly.
I think that's where my brain was going.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Anyway, thank you, and hope you have a better week, Jonna.
Next up, we hear from Lama God.
Lammertslag, Scottic Fixicare, ja, jaig. Be firm, my pecker, your evil stars in the ascendant. Now, as I think I said last time, this is a season that's something of a roller coaster, a season that's slightly uneven, and this is certainly one of the high points. This is certainly one of the best episodes of the season, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that this isn't just one of the best episodes of the season, it's one of the best episodes of Star Trek, full stop. It's up there with some of the great episodes, like, I'd say, Duet, Measure of Man, all of that stuff. Yes, courtroom stuff, I know that courtroom stuff might necessarily be your thing, but yeah, this is good Star Trek, and it's about issues, and it presents it in an interesting and dramatic way, and with consequences to one of the characters that we know and love. Now, obviously, the episode is about clearing Una, Una, of hiding the fact that she's an Illyrian because Starfleet is against genetic modifications. But it's also not, is it? It's not. It's about minorities, it's about persecution, and it's about the law. And they make some great points in this episode that, yes, Una may have broken the law, but what is a law? Are laws always necessarily just? And yeah, they bring up the point that slavery was once legal, apartheid was once legal, all things that are right now people are finding really difficult to cope with. So yeah, this is very, very relevant stuff, and it's good to see it pointed out in a form like Star Trek where we're used to discussing ideas. But the really powerful stuff is where it talks about what the consequences of the anti-augment laws were. It's not just the laws themselves, but it's the persecution that comes from that. The fact that people are emboldened by the laws, by the things that those who are in power say, which leads to people then acting on their worst impulses. Because if you've got something bad at the top, then it's going to trickle down and it's just going to get worse. People are emboldened by what they see that they can get away with. And in this case, what they were able to get away with was things that weren't particularly pretty to Una and her family. And that is very, very sadly something that, of course, is very relevant right now on a number of fronts. You can certainly read this as an allegory for the current anti-trans panic that we've got going on. And a couple of years ago, yeah, sure, law wouldn't be an issue, but laws are starting to be drawn up all across the United States. And yes, that is emboldening people. It's emboldening the worst sort of people. And it's leading to discrimination and hatred and suffering as people do vent their worst impulses, acting on fears and driven not only by laws, but also by those with the most prominent platforms, media, celebrities, and everyone of that ilk. So yeah, this is a very, very important, very timely episode with a very timely message. And yes, although the ending of the episode is a success for Una because she gets off, it's kind of a downer in some respects because she only gets off on a technicality, as they point out. But I don't think that necessarily has to be a bad thing because, as I say, Star Trek is about allegory. The best episodes are the ones where they take modern day issues and present them in a sci-fi setting, and they've done that exactly that here. And although Una's own case doesn't succeed because of a universal solution, they don't solve and fix the law in one. What they do is that it argues very strongly about considering the individual case, the suffering of the individual, someone who needed to seek asylum, to seek shelter. And that's what wins it for her, is when they consider the plight of the individual and start to actually care and think about the individual. And I think that's the important thing here, because it's only by considering individuals that anyone can ever move forward, and that's where the changes come from. So I think ultimately that's a very Star Trek message. I think this is a very Star Trek way of looking at things, and I think it's certainly what provides positive spin here. So yeah, this is certainly a very powerful episode, which, as I say, can be used as an allegory for many, many things. In terms of the episode itself, in terms of the production, there's obviously some great stuff in here. Rebecca Romijn does a really good performance in this episode, trying to both protect her friends and also not get herself into trouble, mostly trying to protect her friends. The actress, I'm sorry, I didn't look up her name, playing Councillor Cthulhu, she did a really, really good job, and between her and Romijn, they really do feel like there was once something between them. There was this friendship. You do really buy that, and that's a great relationship there. And she's just fierce and brilliant herself. I hope we see some more of her in the future. There's some really lovely stuff from Christina Chong as Lan. Tries to find out who it is that actually turned Una in, and I really like that twist that she turned herself in. And as Loran worries that it was her, there's some really, really nice vulnerable stuff there from Chong. That was some really great stuff. And Anson Mount was, of course, great as Pike, who once again is the worried dad trying to protect his family, and some just wonderful stuff. I love the stuff at the start of the episode where he nearly suffocates himself to try and get an appointment with the counsellor, and then later in the episode the various confrontations he has with various people, like the conversation with Battelle and the very awkward conversation with Robert April after he's somewhat slightly attacked on the stand. So yeah, some really, really good stuff there. Really love all of that. And there's some really nice touches in the courtroom scene itself as well in terms of production design. I mean, yes, it's a reuse of one of the sets from Discovery. I think it's the big Starfleet Command set, isn't it? Which immediately makes it feel like original series Trek, where we're just reusing sets again and again and again because, you know, we're trying to save money here. We get to see the little hand scanners, and we got those really chunky data discs. That was really the best thing, those data cartridges they plugged into the console with all the information in. Love that. Do you actually need this in a post-Discovery world? I don't think so, but we've got it there anyway. The dress uniforms are nice, the very original series, but whereas the Admiralty, they were wearing uniforms that are more like the Discovery era uniforms, actually. You kind of got their fill into it, so there's a sense of continuity there as well. They haven't moved over to the original series style uniforms yet, so that's also really, really nice to see. So I like a lot of the production touches in this as well. It does really do a really good job of bridging that gap between Discovery and the original series. Nice. And for all it does elsewhere, the episode does leave one big question though. Given the fact there was a whole 11 minutes between the episode's opening and we're actually getting the opening credits, are they going to bother in the future? Are we going to get to the point where future episodes of Stranger Worlds are just going to have the opening credits once the episode's finished? I think we're getting that way, aren't we? I think this is the most extreme it's been to date, hasn't it? Anyway, as I say, brilliant episode. Love this. Great performances all round. A lot of important things to say. So yeah, I love it. I'd like to see more like this. So as ever, I'll be interested to find out what everyone else made of this. I hope everyone's well. And until next time, glory to you and your cast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't understand why they don't just put the credits at the start these days. There's no reason to put them later in, and good 10 minutes in anymore. It just, we don't, it's been streamed. We don't have adverts, so it's just credits, introduce the setup series, get going. We don't need to stop partway through just because of, that was the old style.
No, it doesn't make any sense at all. And you got the tune.
Yes.
I mean, it used to be that the tune was the start. Tune is the start.
No, not in the US, to be fair. They always
Okay, they did it wrong.
They had a bit of stuff, and then they'd have the credits, and then they'd have their adverts, first lot of adverts before they'd even got into the full episode. So
No, that's weird. In proper countries, you have the tune, and then you have the thing. That's how it should be.
yeah, but I mean, not even these days on the BBC. 9 times out of 10, there's a teaser before the credit. We've all gone over to that way of doing it.
It's silly. Tune starts. It lets you know the programme's starting. So if you haven't sat down yet, you haven't got your beer or your cup of tea or whatever, you hear the tune and you know that's what you got to do. That's its job. Sorry. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is all about minorities and persecution and law, and very relevant. I mean, you mentioned the US llama, but I was, of course, thinking of Brianna Gay, or is it Guy? I'm not sure how you pronounce the surname, Ghey, and fucking Rishi fucking Sunak's anti-trans comment in the Commons while her mother was there. And it's people and cunts like him and their rhetoric and trying to make bad changes to the law that emboldens people to go and attack trans people, or Brexit emboldened racist crime. It's very real and very true and very scary. But it's also true that where you say that, the plight of the individual is the only way to move things forward, that's the only way to engage with people who are anti, because they're usually coming from a place of fear. Sometimes they are just arseholes, but usually they're coming from a place of fear. And so giving them an individual case where that person is the one who's scared, that usually is one of the things that can bring about change and get them to see that it's not like that really. But it's also the case with the law, because it's individual cases that create case law that then bring about wider change.
But yeah, I think it's fair to say that somebody said the only honest review of anything is it's all right if you like that sort of thing. And if you like your sort of courtroom dramas, this is going to be a great episode for you. If that's really not what floats your boat, then, like me, you're going to feel a bit left cold by it all.
So it's absolutely fine.
The same could be said of musicals, of course, but we'll come to that later in the season.
Have they done a period drama?
They have done in previous treks, effectively.
Posh people trouncing around in fancy frocks, bemoaning the fact they haven't made a good marriage. I couldn't give a flying fuck. Doesn't do it for me. That sort of...
Definitely Voyager did that sort of thing on the holodeck a lot, didn't it? I seem to remember.
Period drama, as in something about history involving people who aren't rich, fine. But I'm not interested in the
it's
story.
always Lord Fauntleroy.
Yeah, I'm not interested in the stories of rich people.
Lady
that's all.
Bimbleby and all
Unless it's horror and they're all dying, that's all right.
Yes, in which case they can get preyed on and we enjoy that.
Yes. But, so your comment, you think if you're, rather than you go boring, it's boring.
Well, it was to me because I don't enjoy that sort of thing.
No, boring because I don't like that genre is a perfectly legitimate comment. But if you just say boring, what you're implying is that this is a bad episode that's boring in and of itself, and it isn't. You just don't like it because you don't like courtroom drama. In the same way as if I say...
Well, although again, you see, there are courtroom dramas that do work for me. And actually, technically, there are musicals that work for me as well.
But they're rare. Whereas those of us who enjoy courtroom dramas enjoy this episode. If I was a lone voice enjoying this, and other people who like courtroom dramas were there going, oh, this is boring, you'd be right and I'd be wrong. But the fact is, this is not objectively a boring episode. Instead, it is the type of episode, a genre of episode that you find boring. And that's actually quite a different comment.
Or at least has to try very hard not to be boring.
It has to do something exceptional.
Yes, exactly.
For you to not find it boring. What did Parry think of this, and is he recording by stealth under his desk?
Hello, Art. Parry here to talk about Ad Astra per Aspera, or, as always, Latin. Or we could also call it, wasn't that written on the side of the searcher? I don't know, is this the fastest series to go for a Ponce Latin title, or did Discovery manage to sling one in at the end of season 1? It's got the Ponce Latin title, and they use it a lot, and I did muse briefly, is this just a good way of looking clever if you know a few Latin phrases? I know that's what most of the Tories do. If someone comes up to you and asks you a question, you can go, ad astra per aspera, ipso facto, icthus, Romani zite domum, and nod sagely and presumably some morons out there who still vote Tory will sit there and go, you see, he's a clever man, he knows Latin. I'm not even going to try and turn him, just blood you. But yes, so now this episode, I know you guys weren't looking forward to it. It's a courtroom episode, of course it is. And in fact, it's very much Measure of a Man to Measure Harder. Concepts are very similar. They're defending someone's right to existence to an extent. Well, not quite to existence, but definitely more along the rights of personage rather than something like, say, Drumhead or Court Martial, where someone's on trial for doing a thing. Although she is on trial for doing a thing, lying on her application form. I did like Ness, I can't remember the name now, Nira, I think it was, the lawyer. I quite liked her, and indeed with this episode, I suppose one of the downsides of these episodes is it isn't going to end with Una being locked up for 20 years for treason. That's just not going to happen. So you're really watching it to see how will this shake out. Now, I did like the way they went against the idea of having Pike take the stand. He's going in saying, put me on the stand. And, I can't remember, his girlfriend basically says, right, here's what I'm going to ask you. And there's lots of nice little touches in the build-up. I did like Pike's way of getting the lawyer. You're just his persistence on a planet where he can't breathe the atmosphere. That was a nice touch. But yes, the trial kind of shakes out as we'd expect. There's a lot of showboating. There's some nice montages. We got to see new dress uniforms. Love those. Don't love them actually. I like them. I think it's a fancier version of what we see in TOS, and it's the line this show has to constantly sort of juggle of doing stuff that we saw in TOS. We had actually the chair, the little hand thing, stuff that we see in TOS combined with stuff we see in, obviously dressing it up to look better for a modern audience. The trial had showboating, bits where I did like her point of the Prime Directive being constantly violated, and the way she applied that into the later thing of, oh right, so the rules are rules, but they can be seen with nuance and whatnot. I thought that was quite good. And I actually like the way she beat it with the technicality. The idea that they didn't succeed in getting the law changed so that genetic modification was allowed, because we know that doesn't happen. But instead, this idea of effectively luring Una into pleading asylum. Now, obviously, the Federation looks pretty bad here. And I actually think that's kind of an interesting thing to look at is, do they use augments as a bogeyman? I think they could have done more with that. That they could have kind of pushed the idea of, why were the augments turned into a scapegoat? It's not just, we did, the eugenics wars in history and everyone went nuts. I think it could be good if you'd said something like there were some problems in the colony and perhaps some less scrupulous people used that as kind of a way to push. I think that would have been a nice touch. Downsides of this, like I say, a lot of our cast don't have much to do. A lot of the time they're basically sitting on the couch watching Space Judge Judy, rather than being involved. Indeed, it's very Nira. And I was expecting Nira to have some sort of other mutation, because she was always talking about people who couldn't hide their mutations. And I was expecting at the end out of one of those big cloaks to come like a third arm or something. And we didn't really see that. So that was just, I didn't know if they were trying something. There was also a hint that Vulcan was after Pike. I don't know if you got it. I mean, I loved the bit with Spock, the sort of M'Benga saying, oh no, that's a really heated and angry discussion happening there. And Spock coming in saying, I'm sorry you had to see that. That was like a nice little extra bit. But yeah, I thought there was something that Vulcan had like an ulterior motive. He wasn't just out there to get Una. There was something else going on there. But we know it's not followed up on, so you can forget about that. Overall I enjoyed this. I think it was a good episode, but yes, fairly predictable. So all I'm going to say is do keep up the good work. I always look forward to the podcast and hopefully be back on the next one. But until then, bye for now.
Bye. Yeah, watching them sitting on the couch, watching telly as it were, wasn't good. Really, and I thought the Vulcan was after Pike.
Yeah, they could have made more of him, I think, and it would have made it more interesting.
Yeah,
possibly even picked him up later on in the season. But it just turns out he's just a stickler for the rules. I think is what it boils down to, which is not the most exciting of villains, is it really?
No, and where she was like, not all of us can. The hide our mutations. You did kind of expect there to be a third arm there or something.
No, she's super strong and can carry big rule books, apparently. That's how she's...
Oh, she's super strong.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But, well, interesting you mentioned the drumhead, which, of course, is another courtroom scene episode that has a lot more going on. And, I mean, there's that really dramatic moment where everybody files out of the court because the prosecutor's clearly lost her head.
Yeah.
Including Worf, who sympathised with her as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, unfortunately, there are far better examples out there of Trek doing courtroom drama than this one, but there we go. Right. Okay, so next time we're recording on Thursday the 29th, and it's Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Yeah, which is a really appealing title. And Not Kirk is back. Huzzah.
Oh, it's that one.
Yeah. Is that one that you rewatch?
Yes.
Okay, so at least you enjoy that one. I really can't remember that much about it, other than...
If it's the one I think it is.
It's the Not Kirk one, with La'an.
Yeah.
In the past, I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I liked it or not, to be honest. I just found Not Kirk annoying. But there we go. We'll see how that one goes. Until then, take care. Cheery bye.
Bye bye.
The Star Trek theme was written by Alexander Courage, and here was arranged and performed by Drew Barker.
The artwork was created by Andy Palastides.
All music referenced is for illustrative purposes only, and no copyright infringement is intended.
Find our website at borgcast.libsyn.com.
And we have a YouTube channel as well.
Send emails or MP3s to borgcast@gmail.com.
Shut it down!